Welcome, thanks for being here. So there are 4 bottles on my tray and every one of them came off Temu for about $30 each. Amouage Guidance 46, ex Nihilo's Blue Talisman, Nishane Hacivat, and one that says Gypsy Water that came in a Byredo 13 box. So $120 for the lot a year ago out of curiosity rather than thrift. And I wanted to know how close a copy could get before I formed a strong opinion about copies. And then this one, which I believe is authentic, a tester of Amouage Guidance 46, the X-Ray. Amouage charges $550 for it, and my tester cost me $330. And both of those facts are going to matter more than you'd think, which means that for exactly one of those 4 boxes, I can do the thing nobody watching this can do. I can put the counterfeit Guidance 46 next to the real Guidance 46 and compare like with like. For the other 3, I have nothing. No Hacivat, no Blue Talisman, and no Gypsy Water, for reasons we'll get to. So 4 fakes, 1 control, and I'm better equipped for this than almost anybody who buys one. And 2 of the 5 tests worked, and both of them only worked because I own the real one. So I've spent some time trying to tell them apart without putting any of it on my skin, using every method the internet has ever recommended to me, and I want to show you how that went, because it went badly in ways I didn't expect, and one of the tests I couldn't even attempt. I wasn't fooled, and I wouldn't put too much weight on that if I were you. Nobody sells you an Amouage for $30 in the same way that nobody sells you a pedigreed Labrador Retriever puppy for $4. And I pressed the buy button anyway, because apparently there's some version of me that will spend $30 to win an argument I'm having entirely by myself, with myself. So 4 of them came and I put all 4 on that afternoon, which was the entire point of buying them, and then they went in a box, and the box went in a drawer, and I didn't take it out again for a year, which is not a thing most people do with perfume. It's like what you do with a letter from the tax office. So this isn't the story of a woman who got caught. The stranger version is about a woman, me, paying for the experience on purpose and then hiding the results from myself. And it comes with the one signal that separated these 2 guidance bottles a year before I knew a single fact about any of this. Not the cellophane, not the font, not the code, not my nose either, which only works with the real one beside it. A number. So 5 bottles all together, all bought with my own money. None of the tests are mine. I took all 5 off the internet in the order the internet puts them in and ran them the way you would. Test 1, the cellophane test, which I can't run and neither can you. Every spot the fake guide leads with this one. The wrap should be loose and hand-finished or tight and machine-sealed, depending entirely on which article you happen to read. And so the cheap boxes, my cheap boxes, were opened the day they arrived because that's what a box is for. I can open it standing up in the hall with my coat still on. And for some people, suspicion arrives considerably later, generally around month 4. Generally because somebody at dinner said something with their eyebrows up. So the seal exists for about 4 seconds, during which you're thinking about the perfume rather than the seal. And then it's in the kitchen bin under a tea bag and it's never coming back. evidence with the lifespan of a mayfly, and the Spot the Fake guide wants it examined at the one moment nobody on earth has a reason to. So the first item on every checklist ever published is the one that destroys itself on contact, and it's unavailable to almost everyone who's ever asked this question, because almost nobody asks it before opening the box. And it's worth knowing who publishes the Spot the Fake checklist, since we're here. Perfume retailers, decant shops, affiliate sites. I couldn't find a trade body, a standards organization, or a customs authority anywhere that publishes one for fragrance. And I did look. Customs run consumer campaigns, and trading standards publish advice, and none of it is a checklist you can hold up against the bottle. The people teaching you to spot fakes are the people selling you perfume. So that test is gone permanently, and nobody who writes the guides appeared to have noticed. Now, print quality, registration, the weight of the box, the way the flap tucks in, and this is where the tester arrives, because here's the second test I can't run, and I didn't see it coming. My genuine Guidance 46 came as a tester box, no retail box, which is an entirely ordinary way to buy a perfume. A tester is the house's own juice in the house's own bottle, sent out so that people in shops can spray it, and plenty of them are sold on afterwards. It also means that I own a real Amouage, and I do not own a real Amouage box for the fragrance. So the comparison every guide on the internet opens with, the one I was most confident about when I started, is not available to me. There's nothing to hold the counterfeit box against. What is available to me is exactly what's available to you. One box, under a lamp, tilted at the like a suspicious banknote set against photographs on the internet. And the trade has a word now for the top end of this. Super fakes. In Marseille last year, over 9 counterfeit Hermes Kelly bags. The court weighed the presentation as heavily as the bags themselves, and then it set damages. The dust bags, the branded-looking boxes, the smart addresses of the shops, presentation treated as evidence of intent rather than as decoration. And the bags in that case carried no Hermes name and no Hermes logo anywhere on them. They were convicted on a shape and a clasp. Counterfeiters are reproducing the exact signals you've been told to inspect, and they can do it because those signals are published on the internet by people who want you to feel safe. Nothing. I checked the tuck of the flap in the shape of a printed letter and came away quietly reassured. I'd known from the price before I picked the box up that the reassurance was worth nothing at all. Test 3. The batch code. Now, this is the one most people trust, so give me a minute on it. There's a code on the cheap bottle, 135467. So 6 digits and a space printed on the base where it belongs. The code on my real one is J2378-00433. And for about a minute, that felt like the finding of this episode. These 2 codes aren't the same shape as each other, and one is a letter in front of it and a hyphen in the middle, and the other is 6 digits with a gap, and I can only tell you that because I happen to own both bottles, which is the second time in 10 minutes that a test has turned out to need the answer in advance. It's the opposite of the finding. If this bottle were on sale in Europe, that code would satisfy the labeling rule because European cosmetics law asks for a batch number on the container and the packaging, and there's one. The law asked a question and the counterfeiter answered it correctly. And the code being different from mine settles nothing either, because two genuine bottles filled 8 months apart carry different codes. That's the entire job of a batch number. It records which batch a bottle came out of. It was never built to record whether the batch was real. And copying a string of characters is the easiest step in this whole business. Above the code, on both bases, it says made in Oman, which is where Amouage is, Muscat, in Oman. The counterfeiter has correctly declared the country of origin of a product he didn't make on a bottle he filled somewhere that isn't Oman, and every word of that declaration is accurate. Nothing about the sentence is false. Nothing about it survives contact with $30 either, and we'll come back to that at the end. Now, the websites everybody uses to check a code, none of them belong to the perfume houses. Read what they actually promise you. A manufacture date and a shelf life. Not one of them offers to tell you whether a bottle is real, and none of them will say where its tables came from or who assembled them. One of the larger ones carries a line in its own small print. The tool is for educational purposes, and anybody with doubts about authenticity should consult the packaging or a professional. The website people use to check whether a perfume is real says in its own footer that it can't tell you whether a perfume is real. And even when the guess is right, look at how little it buys you. You type in the code and it tells you when the bottle was made. All it can tell you. You asked whether your perfume is real, and it's answered a question about a date. Now, Creed will not give you a lookup tool at all. Their own instruction, if you suspect a fake, is to send them photographs and the lot number so that they can assess it. They can resolve that number and you can't, which is the entire relationship in 9 words. Meanwhile, Coty went into a court in The Hague in April 2025 holding a bottle of Hugo Boss that was entirely real and proved from its batch number, their own production records and the shipping paperwork that it had been made for the South African market and had absolutely no business being on sale in Europe. On that point, the other side stopped arguing. Not a counterfeit case at all, which is the point. The code let the house read a genuine bottle and say which continent it was born for. Same tool, pointed the other way. So a batch code is the brand's authentication tool. It was never yours. So I'm back at the table with a bottle carrying a code I can't resolve, and the knowledge that resolving it wouldn't have settled anything either, because the only place that number means anything is inside a building I don't work in. Something, then, and not a verdict. A code that looks wrong next to a code I happen to own. So test for the bottle, and here it turns, because this is the test that worked. If you put the 2 bottles next to each other, the differences arrive in about 4 seconds. I mean, look, the fake here is slightly bigger and the color is wrong. The real thing is dusty pink and the copy is coral. And the base of the copy is also thicker. So the bottle within a bottle that Amouage built into the glass tapers harder toward the bottom in the fake. And the address printed underneath is a different address. The batch code is a different code in a different format. And the Amouage logo on the copy sits a shade darker than the logo on the real thing. 6. Not subtle either once they are side by side. So I could pick that bottle off a table across the room now. And before anybody writes it underneath, yes, my genuine one is a tester. What a tester changes is the carton the bottle came inside. The bottle inside it came outside of Amouage's mold and was filled on Amouage's line. If they mold their testers differently from their retail boxes, then of course this test dies alongside the box test, and I've found nothing at all to suggest they do. So then look at what every one of those 6 actually is. Larger than what? Darker than what? A different address from which address? There's no absolute anywhere in that list. No dimension I could have looked up. No color reference Amouage publish. No address they print for you to check yours against. I didn't find 6 flaws in a bottle. I found 6 differences between 2 bottles, and I could only do that because I own the other one. Test 5, my nose. Now this one will bother most of you most, and it should, because it is the test every single person reaches for first and the one they trust without ever having examined why. It opens correctly, not approximately correctly. The first 10 minutes of the $30 bottle are right, and unless you've smelled the real thing, you've no reason on earth to doubt it. Most people never have. You know, it hollows out later, the way a copy usually hollows out later, shorter and simpler on the way down, and the base never arrives where the base is supposed to arrive. So I can tell and look at why, because it's not a skill and it's not a nose. I have a proper instrument on the table, a genuine Guidance 46, the real one, and an X-Ray, a $550 one, same house, same name, same juice, like against like, for the second time in 5 tests, which is why the result is worth something, and also why it's worthless to you. Almost nobody ends up owning the genuine article and its copy together, and nobody sets out to. You've one bottle, and the question you actually want answered is whether that bottle is real. And for that question, my nose is no use to you at all, because the only reason mine worked is that the answer was already sitting on the tray. And look at the other 3 boxes on this tray. No genuine Hacivat, no genuine Blue Talisman, and nothing at all for the perfume that was never made. 3 counterfeits I can't say a single useful thing about by smelling them, which is 3/4 of my own evidence gone, and I'm the person with the shelf. That's the position every one of you is in on every bottle you own. Now, 1 test I couldn't run at all, 1 I could only run half of, and 3 that told me something, every single one of which needed the real bottle standing next to the cheap one. None of which is me being bad at this. Everything the public has been given, used properly, on a clean table, in good light. So there were, as you can see, 4 bottles in that Temu order, and 3 of them have the right house printed on the box. I bought the Nishane Hacivat, an X-Ray de Perfume, and it cost $30. Nishane sell 100 milliliter for $395, which is the same number to the dollar as the standard Amouage Guidance de Perfume. 2 unrelated houses, same real price, same fake twice over. Nishane don't publish a launch year for it and do not name a perfumer. Everybody says 2017, and most people say George Lee, and most of those come from enthusiast databases rather than from the house. I'm telling you that because this is an episode about who's answerable for a bottle, and I'm not going to skip past a house declining to sign its own work. The Blue Talisman box says ex nihilo, which is correct. Ex Nihilo is a Paris house, and Blue Talisman is theirs. A perfume called Jordi Fernandez made the original, and they sell it for about $385. Every word printed on this box is true, except the one that is not printed on it, which is what's inside. And then the fourth box. The fourth box says Byredo 13. So there is no Byredo 13. Byredo have made exactly one numbered fragrance in their history, called 1996 for the photographers Inez and Vanud, and 13 isn't on it. The nearest thing in the world is another 13, which is Le Labo 2010, and even that name isn't a number picked out of the air because Le Labo were commissioned to make it by another magazine in a collaboration Colette in Paris set up, and then sold exclusively until Colette closed. So this box isn't a copy of a perfume. It's a copy of a perfume that doesn't exist, assembled out of the one house's name and half of another house's product, and sold to me for $30. So one box out of four, and notice which direction that cuts in. 3 of them are correct. Right house, right perfume, right country of origin on the base. This is not a sloppy operation. This is an operation that got one thing spectacularly wrong out of 4. And the one thing it got wrong is the only reason I have anything at all to show you. Somebody on that counterfeit product line took one company's name, welded it to a different company's product, printed it, boxed it, palletized it, cleared it through a customs declaration, and sold it to a woman in her own kitchen who put it in a drawer for a year. And so the only conclusive thing on this tray, and look at what it is, not the wrap, not the printing, not the code, and certainly not me, a spelling mistake, essentially of the kind that turns up constantly once you look for it. An investigation into TikTok shop found a counterfeit Dior Sauvage going out as suave and as savage, and Victor and Rolf's Flower Bomb selling under a name that read like 2 men who run a garage. Nobody explained why the names were mangled. My guess is a keyword filter, and a guess is all it is. Now, that is funny, also useless, because you can't build a method out of it. You can't advise people to check whether the perfume they're buying exists. You either happen to know that Byredo have never made a 13, or you don't. And most people buying a $30 or $30 bottle of it have no earthly reason to. Now, widen out from my tray, because this isn't a cottage industry. In February this year, Spanish customs and the Catalan police raided 3 towns in the La Selva district, an hour north of Barcelona. 3 sites and 4 units, because the factory was 2 industrial sheds knocked through into one. 1.2 million counterfeit perfumes, 7 production lines, 150,000 litres of the stuff perfume is made of, an estimated potential capacity of more than 4 million bottles a year. 4 million bottles a year is not a criminal sideline. 4 million a year is a mid-sized fragrance house. Somebody was clocking in. Somebody was ordering caps, chasing a late delivery of caps, and having a difficult conversation with the haulier about the vans. Somewhere in that building there was a man whose entire job was quality control on a counterfeit perfume, and I would like to know what he told people at parties. They also found a showroom, more than 50 brands and models laid out in it, the way a wholesaler lays out a range, and the press note names not one of them. Neither does the wire copy. Neither does any follow-up I could find in 3 languages which tells you something the fragrance internet gets backwards. Nobody at Spanish Customs publishes a league table of which house gets faked most. Neither does the European Intellectual Property Office. Neither does the OECD. Neither does American Customs. They count units and litres and product categories. So when somebody tells you a particular fragrance is the most counterfeited in the world, ask them where the number came from, because nobody has ever published it. Now, an operation running 4 million bottles a year is going to get one wrong. Now, mine says Byredo, and here's the Byredo, and 13. And that is what a typo looks like at industrial scale. You know the line. Fake perfume contains urine, antifreeze and bacteria, repeated at counters and at dinners by people who have no more idea where it came from than I did. You've heard it. Possibly you've said it. And this week I tried to find the study behind it. And the earliest version of that exact sentence I can put a date and a name to is from January 2010 on American breakfast television. The speaker is one senior vice president and publisher of Harper's Bazaar, and her words: active ingredients found in counterfeit fragrance include things like urine, bacteria, antifreeze. No chemist, no toxicologist, no laboratory anywhere behind her. The publisher of a fashion magazine who was, at that moment, running a magazine campaign against counterfeiting, sitting on a sofa at 8 in the morning, saying the word urine. So no laboratory is named, no sample count, no date. 4 years later, the FBI put up a page carrying the urine and a phthalate called DEHP. And the evidence that page offers in full is the phrase government and industry studies and testing. No study, not one, in the 12 years since, with no title, no year, and no link ever supplied. The FBI never mentions antifreeze at all, incidentally. Antifreeze is the Sophie's contribution. Now, that page is now one of the most quoted official sources in the English language coverage of this subject. 16 years, and it roots back to a sofa. The British police have made the strongest version of it 3 times. In 2015, the City of London said laboratory tests on counterfeits had found human urine and cyanide. In 2019, the same unit said it again for Valentine's Day. And in 2022, it said it a 3rd time, almost word for word, hedged by then to what a fake can contain. All 3 times, the sentence belongs to the police force and sits in nobody's mouth. A detective superintendent is quoted in the first, a chief inspector in the second, a sergeant in the third, and not one of them says it. They talk about price and profit and shopping carefully. The sentence about urine arrives on its own outside the quotation marks, and in 11 years, nobody there has published the report, the method, the sample size, or the year the testing supposedly happened. There's no report, not withheld, not redacted, not pending. 11 years, 3 press statements, and no document behind any of them. The force's own campaign page today has quietly dropped the urine and the cyanide and now claims arsenic, mercury and lead in cosmetics rather than perfume, still with nothing attached. And American Customs, who get blamed for the whole thing constantly, appear never to have said it about perfume. Their actual wording is that counterfeit perfumes can sometimes contain unknown chemicals, which is not a finding. It's a shrug with a badge on. Homeland Security did say it in New York in 2016. Urine and antifreeze together, and once again the named agent in that story is quoted at length and does not say it. A real difference sits between this is false and nobody has ever shown it is true. And the second one is where we are. Police forces seize things, and some of them test what they seize. A British lab may well have found something in 2015, with the report now in a filing cabinet somewhere. What I can tell you is that the urine sentence specifically has been repeated in national media for 16 years and has never once arrived with a document attached. The bacteria one I can be firmer about because that is chemistry rather than paperwork. Fine fragrance runs somewhere between 70 and 95% alcohol, and the weakest smelling thing on your shelf is carrying the most of it. The International Standard on Microbiological Risk treats 20% and up as self-inhibiting, which is why nobody preserves a perfume. You can put a great many unpleasant things in perfume. A thriving bacterial culture isn't one of them, and I would rather tell you that than let you carry around a fear that the chemistry rules out. So for about a day, I thought this was going to be a debunking episode, which would have been easy and a bit smug. And then a South Korean consumer agency published something. On the 14th of August, the Korea Consumer Agency announced results from testing 34 counterfeit cosmetics. Chugnam police had seized them in March from a family of 4 running a late-night live shopping broadcast. 7,300 items in all, mostly bags and watches with the cosmetics as sideline. Copies of Chanel, Dior and Creed among them, according to the Korean broadcaster that covered it. 11 of the 34 failed safety standards. 18 of the products were perfumes. 6 of those 18 contained methanol. The legal limit, there is a 0.2% by volume. The 6 came in between 73.7% and 96.9%. 96.9% is not contamination. You don't contaminate something to 97%. That's not perfume with methanol in it. It's methanol with perfume in it. Somebody built those bottles on methanol as the solvent in place of the ethanol that carries essentially every alcoholic fine fragrance made. The Korean agency's explanation is cost. At matched purity, methanol runs about 14,000 1 a litre, and ethanol about 110,000, an eighth of the price. The two liquids look identical, and one of them blinds people. Methanol goes through skin, and the World Health Organization puts absorption through skin on level, or should I say on a level, with swallowing it for producing acute poisoning. In Egypt, newborn babies died of metabolic acidosis after fever compresses soaked in a local alcohol that turned out to be 70 to 90% methanol. 70 to 90% is the strength a perfume is mixed to. That's a British government toxicology document, not a police warning. How fast methanol crosses human skin has been measured on volunteers at exposures as short as 2 minutes. What nobody's done is the arithmetic for a spray. How much of 2 pumps flashes off a wrist before it can get in, and how much does not? The mechanism is well understood. The body turns methanol into formic acid, and formic acid switches off the enzyme the cell makes its power with, and the retina and the optic nerve are the 2 tissues in the body least able to survive the lights going out. up to 484 times the legal limit, and the least bad of those 6 bottles was still 368 times over in something you spray on your neck in the morning. That's the actual finding, not urine. Methanol, measured and counted and printed on the 14th of August 2026, while the internet was still quoting a magazine publisher from 2010. 18 perfumes is a small sample, and it's not the only one. And an earlier version of this script said it was. A Spanish trade laboratory ran a gas chromatography on 4 genuine and counterfeit pairs in 2018 and found diethylene glycol and diethyl phthalate in the copies, and that result is printed inside an official European Union intellectual property report from the following June. An Indonesian chemistry journal found methanol in a counterfeit by the same method in December 2024, 20 months before Korea. A British trading standards prosecution turned on methanol in a fake Dior in 2017, which means I owe you a word about the antifreeze. Diethylene glycol isn't the ethylene glycol in your car. It's the cough syrup poison, the one that has killed children in Panama and in Gambia. It's also arguably a glycol. A laboratory found it in counterfeit perfume, and a European agency printed the finding. So the woman on the sofa was pointing in roughly the right direction 8 years before anybody checked, which isn't the same thing as knowing. But it's not nothing, I guess. The field is still small. 12 papers, most of them tiny, most of them asking whether a bottle is genuine rather than whether it's safe. What Korea added was the number next to the poison. I've worn all 4 of these fragrances once a year ago on the day they came, which was the experiment this episode's question asked, for $30 a time. For 3 of the 4, I had nothing to compare them against, and it didn't occur to me at the time. After that afternoon, I put them in their box and they've stayed in it. And reading the Korean numbers this week retired the idea of ever putting one on my neck again, and that decision came out of a laboratory report rather than out of anything I smelled myself. And so somewhere in the middle of this, I found the phrase that reorganized the whole episode. And I found it twice on 2 continents in 2 statutes written 13 years apart. European cosmetics law says a product may only be placed on the market if a legal or natural person established inside the Union has been designated as its responsible person. American law, in the Cosmetics Act Congress, buried in the December 2022 spending bill, reaches for the same 2 words and hangs a shorter list on them. The responsible person is the manufacturer, packer, or distributor whose name appears on the label. The responsible person. Perfume sold itself with a woman running through a wheat field toward a horse. 2 legal systems looked at the entire apparatus, standing behind her, and independently reached for the same flat phrase. A named human being or a named company whose whole job is to be the one who answers the telephone. That person has a list. In Europe, commission a safety assessment and sign off a safety report. Keep a file describing how the thing is made and keep it for 10 years after the last batch goes out, which for a perfume still in production means the clock hasn't started. Notify it to a central database before it goes on sale with a named human to ring and a formulation good enough to treat somebody with. manufacture to good manufacturing practice, which the regulation defines by pointing at an international standard. And that standard is where the batch records live, and put the name, the address, the batch number, and the full ingredient list on the label. In America, the list is shorter and the spine is identical. List the product with the regulator, hold records substantiating that it's safe, report it inside 15 working days when somebody's seriously hurt, and register the factory if you're the one running it. Now, set that aside the bottle from La Selva. There's no responsible person because there's no lawful person to name. There's no safety assessment because no one signed one. No database entry either, so if a child sprays it in their eyes at 11 o'clock at night, the poison center has nothing to look up. There's no batch records, so there's no recall. So if the tank was wrong, then every bottle from that tank stays in the world permanently. No allergen declaration. So a woman who's known for 15 years that she reacts to oak moss can't avoid it because the box describes a formula that isn't in the bottle. The case against a counterfeit sits there and nowhere else. Nothing to do with what is dissolved in the alcohol, the absence of a name. That absence isn't a side effect of counterfeiting. It's the definition of it. Everything else is negotiable. The juice might be decent. The bottle might be beautiful, and the good ones are now. The box might be indistinguishable under a lamp. What cannot be faked, ever, structurally, is somebody standing behind it who can be found and sued and shut down. Run that back through the Korean results. 6 bottles built on methanol did not happen because somebody was wicked. They happened because nobody in that chain was answerable to anybody, so there was no cost to using the cheaper solvent and no mechanism by which anyone would find out. The poison is downstream of the missing name, which is a duller sentence than the one about urine, and happens to be the true one. So the scare stories do the counterfeit an enormous favor. The urine line exists to frighten you. Also checkable, so you check it, it dissolves, you feel clever, then the relief carries you straight past the real thing, which is a story about disgusting ingredients, invites you to trust your nose. A story about missing paperwork tells you your nose was never involved. So one correction while we're here, because it belongs in this episode more than anywhere else. IFRA isn't the law. It's a trade body founded in 1973, which says of itself that it's not a regulatory authority and imposes no legal obligation. Its standards are contractually binding on its members, and its members are, on its own fingers, about 4/5 of the world's fragrance production by volume, which is close enough to feel like law if you happen to be the other fifth. When you read that a material has been banned by IFRA, an industry association has restricted the people who signed up to it. America is bound neither by IFRA nor by the European regulation. What America does have is the responsible person, which is what matters here. Because people conflate the trade body with the statute constantly, and the conflation makes a counterfeiter sound like a man ignoring a dress code. He is not. He is ignoring the only part of this entire business that exists purely for the person buying the bottle. None of that paperwork is a magic circle. I mean, it doesn't mean that a real bottle is safe for you personally. Plenty of people react badly to perfectly legal perfume. What it means is that when something goes wrong, there is a formula on file, a batch to trace, an address to write to. It's not a guarantee of safety. It's a guarantee that somebody can be asked. So here is the answer. and it is unglamorous. And I did try to find you a better one. Two sums on one perfume, both of them mine. Amouage want $550 for Guidance 46. I bought a genuine tester of it from a discounter for $330, which is 60%. Temu sold me the other one for $30, which is 5%. 66% and 5.5%. So genuine product does escape the official chain, and we do call it the grey market. It's real and it's mostly lawful in America, and it's where a whole lot of the good discounts live. A distributor overbuys, a market gets discontinued, a shipment has to move before the dating goes bad. A counter is refitted and its testers go out of the door, which is how the only genuine bottle on this table reached me. A discounter buys it well below wholesale and sells it well below list. I have exactly one data point, and it is mine. 60% of retail is what I paid for a bottle I have no reason at all to doubt. What the discounter paid to get hold of it, I don't know. And neither does anybody else, because nobody publishes it. It was less than 60% though, because he ate too. 66% is the discount. Somebody in that chain took less than they wanted, and everybody in it still ate. 5.5% is not a discount. 5.5% is a different object. No route runs from an Armani factory to my sofa that ends at $30 and still leaves a manufacturer, an exporter, a haulier, a platform, and a seller, each with a margin. That number isn't suspicious. It's arithmetically impossible. And working that out takes 4 seconds and no knowledge of perfume whatsoever. And notice which Amouage they copied. Not the $395 Guidance. They copied the $550 X-Ray, the expensive sibling. The price is the only test that works, and it works because the counterfeiter can't fix it. He can copy the box, the cellophane, the cap, the opening 10 minutes, and he can put a code on it, and it means nothing. But he can't copy the price, because the low price is the entire product. It's the one signal that can't be faked, since faking it would end with a trade. Now, a decent objection lives here and deserves its strongest form, which I will make on behalf of the man who will write it in the comments at 2 a.m. without watching this far. You are doing public relations for an industry with enormous margins. The juice is a small fraction of what you pay. The rest is the bottle, the campaign, the face on the poster. The seizure figures are calculated at retail prices nobody was ever going to pay, and now the brands would like you to be frightened on their behalf of the competition. Well, you know, most of that's right. The valuations are exactly that. When Spanish customs put a figure of $111 million on that seizure, they were pricing it as though every bottle had sold at full retail, and their own note says so in as many words. That is how every agency on earth reports a seizure, and it's not money anyone lost. The margins are large. Everybody in the trade says so, and nobody publishes the number. And the person who buys a $30 bottle was never going to buy the $550 one. The objection wins all of that, and then loses the only argument that matters, and it loses on the Korean numbers. The charge against a counterfeit was never that it undercuts a markup. The charge is that nobody knows what's in it, including the seller. And nobody is answerable when the answer comes back at 96% methanol. That case would be exactly as strong if a perfume cost $9. A sharper version deserves more sympathy and gets it from me. If you cannot tell the difference, there's no difference. It fails for the same reason those 6 Korean bottles passed. They were bought, sold, presumably worn. Nobody's nose objected because methanol and ethanol both smell are very nearly nothing. And indistinguishability is not evidence. That is the difference. A sharper version deserves more sympathy and gets it from me. If you can't tell the difference, there's no difference. And it fails for the same reason. Those 6 Korean bottles passed. They were bought, sold, presumably worn. Nobody's nose objected because methanol and ethanol both smell of very nearly nothing. Indistinguishability isn't evidence that the difference is imaginary. Indistinguishability is the hazard, and a bottle that announced itself would not be worth anybody's Saturday. The 4 cheap bottles don't live on my perfume shelf. They've lived in a box, in a drawer, apart from everything else since the day they arrived, and I did that without thinking about it. On the day they arrived, as soon as I'd finished trying them, and I've only worked out this week what I was doing. Nobody told me to quarantine them. There was no Korean laboratory in August of last year, and nothing whatsoever to suggest there was anything wrong with the liquid. I simply couldn't put a thing I couldn't account for next to the things I could. And that instinct was right a full year before a single fact arrived to justify it. That box came out of the drawer for the first time to make this episode, which is the only reason these 4 are sitting in front of me now. And they'll go back into that box when I stop filming. But one thing changes, and it isn't the inspecting. The inspecting was never on offer. And holding a box up to the light, like a bank teller, was never a question about the box. It's the number, which was sitting in front of me the whole time, being obvious. Somebody's name is on the real one. Everything else on this table is glass. The 4 cheap bottles go back in their boxes now, and the boxes go back in the drawer where they live, which is where they sat for a year before I bought them out for you. And if you have a bottle you've never been sure about, and I suspect a lot of you do, I would love to know what the bottle is and what you paid and what the house actually charges for the OG. If you came here from the Wednesday Creed episode, this is the other half of the same week. That episode asked whether the house history was real. This one asks whether the bottle is. If this episode earned it, please like and subscribe. See you soon.